The door didn't just open, it exploded. Cold air knifed through the cabin, scattering papers across the pine floor. In that blinding gust of snow and fury stood Marjorie Cole, president of the Lakewood Heights Homeowners Association, gripping her clipboard like a badge of power. She had ruled the lake for a decade, policing shutters and shrubs as if beauty were a criminal code. But this time she chose the wrong door, because seated at the table beside Daniel Rivers was the most powerful legal figure in the state. In one heartbeat, the balance of control flipped. Her clipboard slipped from her fingers, and the same rules she had used to dominate others began turning silently against her. She hadn't broken into a cabin that morning. She had broken into an investigation. 2 years earlier, Daniel had bought the cabin for quiet. A civil engineer turned lecturer, he had grown tired of city sirens and of condolences that never filled the space his wife once occupied. The lake promised rest. Pine reflected in still water, loons calling at dusk, silence that healed. But peace, he discovered, can provoke those who feed on control. Marjorie introduced herself within hours of his arrival. Mauve cardigan, posture like authority carved in bone. She handed him a pamphlet of regulations and smiled without warmth. Within a week, he received his first violation notice, unapproved deck stain. Then another for a garden statue. Then for parking his pickup overnight in the drive. He paid the fines, not because he was guilty, but because he was tired. Yet the notices multiplied, and with each envelope came the faint scent of contempt, an assumption that he did not quite belong. Neighbors warned him to keep her happy. "She's been president for 10 years, one whispered. Nobody runs against her. Daniel nodded, pretending to agree, but inside he cataloged everything. Dates, wording, tone? He built a digital folder titled Maintenance that was quietly filled with evidence. What he wanted was solitude. What he got was surveillance. Marjorie's SUV appeared at odd hours, her flashlight slicing across his dock as if checking for trespassers. The irony stung. He owned the last plot in the subdivision outright. When he found a violation notice nailed to his door, the nail itself felt like a message. This wasn't about bylaws. It was about dominance. That night he opened the HOA's online portal. Budgets were public record, though few residents ever looked. He scrolled through columns until a phrase snagged his eye. Maintenance reimbursement $8,400 to Lakefront Management Solutions. A quick search showed the company was registered under Robert Cole, her husband. He sat back, the pattern clicking into place. Small fines funded something larger, a quiet siphon behind manicured hedges. He spent the next month gathering files, mirroring them to an encrypted drive. Screenshots, PDFs, bank routing numbers hidden in public postings. The deeper he looked, the louder the silence became. When his evidence filled 2 binders, he called Elena Torres, a legal consultant he once mentored. She reviewed everything, page by page, then met his eyes. "This isn't sloppy bookkeeping," she said. "It's fraud." She forwarded the case to her contact at the State Attorney General's office, Naomi Caldwell, a woman known for dismantling quiet corruption. Naomi proposed a discreet meeting away from reporters. Daniel offered the cabin. The date was set for the first Saturday of winter. He stacked firewood, cleared the long drive, and waited. Morning arrived muffled by snow. At 9, a black SUV glided to a stop outside the cabin. Naomi stepped out, mid-50s, calm authority radiating from her stillness. Elena followed, laptop under one arm, accompanied by an investigator with a camera. Inside, they spread documents across the table, tracing money trails through columns of false invoices. Naomi listened more than she spoke, occasionally marking a page. "This matches a pattern," she said at last. 3 similar HOAs under review. Same handwriting on checks. For an hour they worked through numbers and timelines. Then came the pounding, heavy, urgent, insistent. The kind of knock meant to declare ownership of the air. Daniel froze. Naomi looked toward the door. Another crash, louder. A voice sliced through the wind. "Open up, Mr. Rivers. This is an HOA inspection. You can't host unauthorized meetings on association property." Elena blinked in disbelief. Naomi raised an eyebrow but remained seated. The next blow cracked the lock. The door swung wide and slammed the wall. Snow gusted in. Marjorie Cole strode across the threshold, fury wrapped in wool. She began to speak, but the words disintegrated when she saw the table. Folders, seal, badge gleaming under lamplight. Naomi's badge. The transformation was instantaneous. The predator's stance dissolved into uncertainty. The clipboard dropped. Silence devoured the room. Naomi didn't rise. She simply looked up. "Good morning, Miss Cole," she said evenly. Marjorie tried to recover, muttering about community standards, but her voice quavered. Naomi gestured toward an empty chair. "Please sit." The investigator's camera blinked red. Elena folded her arms. For 20 minutes, the questions came with surgical precision. Why were payments authorized without receipts? Why were HOA funds routed to a private account? Why had she entered a resident's home without consent? Marjorie's explanations tangled themselves. Each sentence contradicted the last. Daniel watched in silence, the first real calm he'd felt in months. When Naomi placed a single sheet before her, a formal summons for the interview, Marjorie's hands trembled. She signed acknowledgement, stood, and left without another word. Her SUV fishtailed down the icy road until its taillights disappeared into snow. Inside, nobody spoke for several seconds. Then Naomi exhaled softly. "Keep the door as it is," she said. Let it remind her. Outside, the wind died. The lake lay still beneath its frozen skin. By the next morning, word had already begun to spread. It started with a text thread among board members, then a whisper over coffee at the corner store. Within 2 days, the Lakewood Chronicle published the headline, "HOA President Under Investigation for Fraud and Unlawful Entry." Neighbors who once looked away when Daniel passed on the street now slowed their cars to wave. Some stopped by in person, arms full of casseroles and apologies. They told stories of fines for invisible weeds, of threats mailed in elegant envelopes. A retired couple admitted they had paid special assessments for landscaping that never happened. The lake that had felt divided by fear began slowly to thaw. Investigators from the state capitol combed through years of records. The pattern was unmistakable: inflated invoices, duplicate checks, phantom vendors. Marjorie's husband, Robert, faced charges of embezzlement and falsifying documents. She faced criminal trespass and misuse of funds. When she appeared in court, the same clipboard she once carried everywhere sat in an evidence box beside her. The community voted to dissolve the HOA by a margin of 42-3. Daniel abstained. He spent that day repairing the door she had broken, setting each hinge carefully, sanding away splinters. He left one long crack visible in the frame, a pale seam against dark wood, proof that even damage can become design. A week later, the phone rang. It was Naomi Caldwell. Her voice, usually measured, carried a note of satisfaction. "The audit's finished," she said. "We're recommending new oversight laws statewide. Your documentation made that possible." Daniel looked out across the lake. A thin crust of ice shimmered in the morning sun. "I just wanted peace," he said quietly. "Peace takes proof," Naomi replied. "You gave us that. Spring came early that year. Snow receded into the woods and the water turned glassy. Children fished from the docks again. Without the HOA's endless decrees, neighbors organized their own cleanup days and picnics. No fines, no committees, just a quiet agreement to treat one another well." Daniel returned to the university. In his ethics seminar, he told an anonymous story about governance and integrity. He spoke of how small rules can become instruments of control and how evidence, gathered patiently, can realign an entire system. He never mentioned names. He didn't need to. On weekends, he stayed at the cabin reading on the porch until dusk. Sometimes he caught himself listening for footsteps on the gravel drive, but none came. What filled the air instead was the hum of insects, the distant ripple of water against the dock, the kind of silence that isn't absence, but equilibrium. Months later, a new sign appeared at the community entrance. No ornate crest, no president's name, just a simple brass plate engraved with 3 words, "Community First. Always." Daniel would touch the repaired door each time he stepped outside, tracing the faint line where the wood had split. That crack, he decided, was a better teacher than any textbook. It proved that peace doesn't mean untouched. It means rebuilt with honesty. He often thought about the moment Marjorie had frozen in his doorway, the flash of recognition when power met accountability. It wasn't the Attorney General's presence that silenced her. Not really. It was the mirror suddenly held up to her own reflection. The lake remained calm long after headlines faded. New families moved in, unaware of the drama that once unfolded there. Sometimes, on clear mornings, Daniel watched the mist lift from the water and felt a quiet gratitude for the storm that had come through his life. Broken a door and forced the truth into daylight. Power built on fear had collapsed, just as it always does. All it had taken was one open door and the right people sitting inside.